My sister looked me up and down the moment she walked through the door. A cruel smirk stretched across her face, like she had been rehearsing it the entire drive over. Still single? LOL. My ex-husband stepped in right behind her, shaking his head with open contempt. Hey, ugly! Still the same? They had come back after 3 years, expecting to find me exactly where they left me, broken and buried, ready for one final victory lap. But before I could say a single word, my father slowly rose from the head of the dining table. The room went completely silent. He looked both of them dead in the eye and said with absolute calm, "Good timing. I actually have something very important to tell you." The smirks vanished instantly. The color drained from their faces and left something far more satisfying behind. Pure, unguarded panic. They had no idea the trap had already been sprung long before they ever pulled into that driveway. My name is Emily Carter. I am 34 years old, and 3 years ago, my entire world was torn apart by the two people I trusted most. It started on what should have been an ordinary Friday evening. I had cut a business trip short and was heading home with takeout, looking forward to a quiet night with my husband Mark. I walked through our front door, climbed the stairs, pushed open the bedroom door, and the marriage I had spent 7 years building simply ceased to exist. Mark was there. So was my younger sister Vanessa. There were no tears, no explanations, no shame. Just cold, calculated indifference, as if I were the one who had walked into the wrong room. Within 48 hours, Mark had filed for divorce and quietly drained every dollar from our joint savings account, money we had spent years building together, using it to fund a lavish tropical vacation with Vanessa. They didn't sneak away in shame. They posted the photos online for the entire family to see. And right before Vanessa blocked me on every platform, she sent one final text. "Some women just know how to keep a man, Emily. Don't take it personally." Then, 3 years of complete, unbroken silence. I was left with an empty house, a crushed spirit, and a mountain of legal bills. For months, I barely functioned. I eventually moved back into my parents' home, and the world assumed I was there to quietly fall apart. What no one could see was that my father and I were already laying the groundwork for something else entirely, something patient, something that would take time but would ultimately be impossible to ignore. I spent those 3 years rebuilding myself from the ground up, working in near total silence, waiting for the day the smoke would finally clear. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. My mother's voice was careful and hesitant over the phone. Vanessa had reached out to my father. She and Mark were back in town, and they wanted to come for Sunday dinner. Vanessa had framed it as extending an olive branch. The phrase alone sent something cold moving through my chest. After 3 years of silence, after stealing my husband and laughing in my face, she wanted to stroll back into our family home, like she had simply been away on a long vacation. My first instinct was pure refusal. I told my dad I would book a hotel for the weekend. But my father placed a steady hand on my shoulder and looked at me with an expression sharp and calm at the same time, the look of a man who already knew something the rest of the room didn't. "No, Emily," he said quietly. "You stay right here. You've hidden your strength long enough. It's time they see exactly who you've become." Something in the way he said it made me exhale and settle, so I stayed. When Sunday evening arrived, I watched from the window as a sleek luxury car rolled into the driveway. Vanessa stepped out in a designer dress with diamond bracelets catching the light. Mark followed in tailored trousers, surveying my parents' home with casual arrogance, as if he were inspecting something beneath him. They didn't look remorseful. They looked like conquerors, returning to a territory they had already claimed, and they carried that attitude straight through the front door. The moment Vanessa spotted me near the kitchen counter, her face shifted into something slow and deliberately cruel. She stepped closer, looked me up and down, and delivered her line with a practiced smirk. Mark added his contribution immediately, laughing and telling me I hadn't upgraded my wardrobe or my life since he left. They fed off each other's cruelty, the way they always had, waiting for me to shrink. My mother stood frozen across the room, face pale with shock. But my father, seated quietly at the head of the table, didn't flinch. He simply watched them, with an expression that gave absolutely nothing away. What Mark and Vanessa didn't know was that they hadn't come back simply for reconnection. They had come back because they assumed there was still something here worth taking. The family trust, the business legacy, the inheritance they believed was simply waiting to be collected by whoever showed up bold enough to claim it. They had mistaken my silence for stagnation and my patience for weakness. They were standing in the middle of a room they thought they understood, completely blind to everything that had changed while they were gone. Then my father pushed back his chair. The scrape of wood against hardwood cut through the silence like something physical. He rose slowly, adjusted his jacket, and looked at both of them with a steadiness that was almost unsettling. He told them calmly that they had walked in tonight bragging and strutting like they had conquered the world. He told them they had made a fatal mistake. They assumed that while they were away living off stolen money, everything here had frozen in place. They assumed the family business was sitting untouched, waiting for their return. They assumed wrong. He reached into his jacket pocket and placed a thick manila folder on the dining table with a heavy, deliberate thud. 3 years ago, he said, when they chose to destroy this family for their own selfish desires, they believed they were leaving Emily with nothing. They thought she was weak. They expected her to stay down. But while they were busy throwing away their integrity, Emily had been working. She had been building. 2 years ago, he had officially stepped down from Carter Enterprises. He had not handed control to a board. He had not left provisions for extended family. Emily was the sole CEO and majority owner. Every asset, every commercial property, every patent, built over 30 years, had been legally transferred into her name. And this house, the very floor they were standing on, the deed had been transferred into my name 6 months ago. They were not guests in my parents' home. They were standing in my house. Vanessa's jaw dropped. Mark's face emptied completely. The man who had strutted through the door treating me like an afterthought was now staring at the woman who held total financial authority over everything he had ever wanted. My father looked at them both with quiet finality. They had not come back to extend an olive branch. They had come to collect what they assumed was owed to them. And as of this moment, they were permanently removed from the family trust. The silence that followed was suffocating. Mark stammered, saying it was impossible, that I couldn't possibly be running Carter Enterprises. I spoke for the first time that evening. I told him calmly that I had been running it for over 2 years, and then I told him I knew exactly why he had really come back tonight. It had nothing to do with family or forgiveness. His consulting firm, Apex Global, was quietly bleeding money and sitting on the edge of total collapse. He had been hunting for a primary investor to back a $5 million credit line, and he had planned to pitch my father over dinner, charming his way back into the family's good graces just long enough to get what he needed. Vanessa spun toward him, demanding to know what I was talking about, because he had told her the business was thriving. Mark snapped at her to be quiet, and dropped every last trace of his performance. He gripped the back of a dining chair, knuckles going pale, and turned to me with raw desperation, replacing all of that earlier swagger. He said the investment board had already confirmed that funding through a company called Parent Holdings Group had been approved, and that final sign-off was happening the following week. I let a beat of silence pass before telling him that Parent Holdings Group was a subsidiary of Carter Enterprises. The contract was sitting on my desk. I had been scheduled to sign it Monday morning. Mark sank into the chair and buried his face in his hands. Then he looked up and begged. He said if I didn't approve the funding, his creditors would liquidate everything he owned by the end of the month. The house, the cars, all of it gone. He said we were family. He said please, more than once. I let the word family sit in the air between us. Then I told him he had stopped being family the moment he walked out that door 3 years ago and never looked back. I stood up slowly and looked at both of them, really looked, taking in what they had become. Mark was folded into that chair with the arrogance completely gone, replaced by the panic of a man who had finally run out of options. Vanessa was crying, her carefully constructed image dissolving as the full weight of everything she had traded her life for became undeniable. I looked at my sister and told her yes, I was still single, but I was independent, financially secure, and answerable to no one. She had traded her integrity for a man who was about to lose everything. Mark had traded a loyal wife for a lifestyle built on sand. They had gotten exactly what they deserved in each other. Then I pointed to the front door and told them to get out of my house. They didn't argue. They walked out quietly into the cool night, leaving behind nothing but the shattered remains of everything they had assumed was waiting for them. The fallout came fast and complete. Within a month, Apex Global collapsed under the weight of its debts. Mark lost the car, the rented mansion, and the professional reputation he had worked so hard to project. Vanessa gave up the designer wardrobe and moved into a tiny studio apartment, working double shifts just to keep up with her bills. Without money and the illusion holding things together, whatever they had called their relationship dissolved just as quickly. It turned out what they had mistaken for love was really just two selfish people using each other, and the moment the resources dried up, so did everything else. As for me, I expanded Carter Enterprises into new markets, walked into every boardroom without apology, and built something that would outlast every cruel word ever thrown at me across a dinner table. I found a peace I hadn't expected, not because everything worked out perfectly, but because I had done the work, stayed patient, and trusted that the truth would eventually speak for itself. Karma doesn't always move on your timeline. It doesn't always announce itself in advance. But when it finally arrives, dressed in designer clothes and dripping in diamonds, it is the most complete and satisfying thing you have ever witnessed.